development just take a different shape. Recent part of seeing where impact need to adopt climate resilience policies. We had in the morning a number of policies that we have adopted. I think it's time to act now because the district board has seen the slides and we brought out very critical findings. So in there as well in the policies which are time to act is now. I think that's a thing to say. In doing this assessment, we are a consultant through the UN within the bit of dynamic systems, dynamic assessments in terms of looking at what's available. The available process plan is the strategy, government project strategy, very ambitious state in terms of how we can in terms of bringing out. So most of the findings show that if we continue at the current pace where we're taking our interventions, all things being equal, taking into consideration the current funding, the implications are what depicted in the slide. So just as we mentioned earlier, one Zambia is really recording state rise in temperatures. This is very disastrous to emphasize that climate change is real, and it was showing in terms of the program for this assessment starts from when as back as 1971, where we are. So it's showing that the temperatures are increasing since 1971, and then the rate of increase the 5 to 4 by 10 of the century. So let's not show trends of why we're coming from. So in terms of rainfall pattern, from the model to show the maximum simple rainfall, from the projected to increase by 3.6% by the end of the century. However, have increased by 2.3 days. Basically, showing that this by the current therefore it will reduce by 2.2 by the end of the century. Same here is talking about concept drivers. Basically saying that 691 projects that should by the end of the century to now agriculture conditions that are the local standard deviation from normalized. So also as part of rainfall pattern, communities found where one project in the century works the pictures very well. Then these are showing monthlies from 1960 to 2020 and performance. So generally, these graphs are showing that climate change is real and what coming from. But I think then it's time to act. What do we do? I think that's the message. This one is about the drought. Other is that. So what's on the map? The lower, the green is the lower, and red is like so the hazard, vulnerability, and the drought risks. And look at the drought, it's very similar to where those are. So the question is, what is can you see that as our, but therefore it's not an option. It's not an option to react. So like I was saying, based on strategy, which is a strategy for the country, if we implemented the program strategy and agreement strategy, we expect good results. But if you don't, those trends I was showing will change. But the question is to act. How we do different things, now we do them differently. Because we need to change those scenarios and what was. And also Zambia, was mentioned in one, then this is Zambia's certificate. They get this, and they're all trying to get in those strategies. We need to implement them and we need to mobilize resources for them. So if effectively implemented green growth strategy by the end of 2030, expect that the 2030 human development index, this is your welfare and the income, water, and we create over 5,000 jobs. 30% reduction in poverty, clean nutrition access to the population. Reduction of 6 million tons of entrepreneurs, 5% in SDGs attainment. Just of SDGs, you might be aware that in our current national plans, we've been stringent to SDGs. That is to say that even as we're implementing this program, and you look at the current trend now, we even in the national plan are below the targets. Even attainment of SDGs, we are below the target. So as long as we don't address human development, we're also going to meet the SDGs. So the important is that we are not failing on SDGs. The 2024 HDI attainment, 159%. The 2030 goes well, then 62% and 2050. But this cannot be achieved to change our current scenario. Also, issues of population, race and equality, issues of inequality, income distribution, the difference between the rich and very rich population coefficient, which is even used to measure that, is one of the critical issues but discounted or so anything above one is a challenge and to be mindful of that the income distribution is very key. We need to reduce this gap and we need to apply policies and climate change has impacted that. How do we need to change this scenario? Because poverty is happening now. Because most of the people are areas depend on natural resources for their survival, lost forests, catchment water quality affected, which is the water problem, energy. So how do we address that? We need to change the scenario. Like it was mentioned in the morning, in that issues of food security, energy as well, but this time around we should discuss climate package. But as a government, we need to change this scenario. How do we harness these resources going forward? That's the policy now. Same at amount of energy is the enabler, the economy, seeing energy crisis. SMEs as well, large scale now, so economy can't go there. Subsequently, revenue authority collect less in terms of taxes. There's less participation in the economy. So climate change is due when at macro level we reduce energy discharge consumption and employment, which is serious issue. Agriculture, I think it's common knowledge that it's the backbone of food security and the major population remains exposed to climate. So we need to find an adaptation and scope to action, which was also a message. Here there were scenarios in terms of climate change policy. So there is one on agriculture, electricity generation, access to electricity, and also the energy board. So let's another thing is expected to add renewable private generation. So meaning this is what's contained in the Green Growth Strategy. If we are committed and to that intervention and funds alone, we're able to address that. But if we today's situation. I think I think the human rights aspect it's very difficult to work with Parliament because this is where now what really seeing is what development in our grassroots. How we better of people. So the showing that especially just things they used to measure how effective of the index. It's the health of measure the life expectancy for our education, how many days in school, typically how long children stay in school, standard of living. These has to do with income. These are the first five singles of the higher score. So from the report, human development index was by province was 24 expected years of school, years of schooling years, mean years of schooling, the province. So able to see why a province is fair. So for example, country and then the index are in that Central Province, Copper Province, 0.4, Eastern, all the way down to Western 0.6. Then trends in human development by province. For trend 0 is now a trend. Trend 0 is all the way to 2024. It shows you now for instance, 0.4, then 2010, 0.4, rank number 5. So Northwestern was number 1 for Osaka, then Copper, then Southern Province. Now the issue of gender inequality is also so this is gender with focus on reproductive health, maternal health and mortality, also those are the birth rate. This is very beautiful because it shows how maternal mortality by 24 around this how we are empowerment, parliamentary certificate, and separate labor market association. So this was also so we had a case more gender economic and the so when systems of government then it wasn't maternal mortality deaths by 100,000 life deaths, 107, then all of gender inequality in 5. So this is where one was. So the GTI comparing problem for women and men to see how equal they are in terms of health, education, school, and family. Men and women are similar, easily close to one, but there's a big gap. GTI is not showing gender equality improvement. So we still have a chance to abandon this. The problem by province, in terms of gender, we have central children expectancy for female, male, 4.2, all the way maybe Chinga, we have females, life expectancy. Let's see which one is nice. So interesting life expectancy is point very clear of what was because with the sun, 59, China 62, Northern 62, August 61, Southern 64.2, Western 50.2. Next slide. So therefore, with what is been shared, now that change is elect, cross-cut is normally issue. What do we need to do? We are following the policies, but how we understand how climate change is so ongoing, we need to do things differently. So this some of the initiatives we take, but I can also we have to appreciate that some of the initiatives we share to enhance our national development process but the opposite is about the plan and things to look at this aspect very different. Some of the recommendations we touched on today continue to come. Is strong emphasis on the need to strengthen sectorial to integrating cooperation, especially in the lower levels, because this is private topic, consumption of sectors. But what is more critical, enhanced resource mobility, the domestic market also key. I think in the morning session was talked about the big brothers as a part of the conversation, everyone on the outside. But I think also in two businesses. You know what? How to mobilize resources for this? Yes, for the green growth strategy. But how we mobilize it now? Looking at what strategies we share and for us to change that narrative. How what can we do based on change to mobilize resources? We need to focus on also very good governance structures and also companies such as climate change initiatives. This is very key, and also partnerships. So I think going forward, this is now the new outlook planning process and where we need to change the narrative that we need to incorporate the private sector. Innovative instruments, green bonds, the green fund, and other incentives also to attract private sector. With regard to technology, also emphasis came on proven business knowledge systems. I think there's so much knowledge out of business knowledge. We're not completing it, which can be helpful. So we need to find a way of documenting this knowledge. We need to map up from the knowledge going towards GIS system monitoring, strengthen the monitoring, turn around time from disasters, establish climate change finance system, also very good. Policies also to align to national goals. There should be dynamic documents we develop, but with these emerging issues right now. Strengthen local capacity by equipping community institutions, essential systems. Youth innovation is very great to acknowledge. Because from what we see, the most data the communities. Like just an example, there was an assessment which was done in Northwestern where money production was able to make so much money. Now the assessment was done, they lost out this communities. So what are they doing? So we need to strengthen that. But the question of sustaining these communities, we need to keep skills. Now, more important, before I think it's just now to the Honorable Zafara on, I think, this space of climate change as well as environment. I think it's something that we better than I'm not interested to that. That is something that we pay attention to. And as actually thinking, planning that has been so very difficult. Because we go out and share numbers, they actually present with one. If you look at, if now we're saying climate change is no longer an environmental development issue, we need to be reporting about it in terms of numbers. All our environmental statistics must be on TikTok, hours of forestry, the province in that, water catchment areas. In terms of wildlife protection, we need to really have positions. Because if we don't have a system like that in place, even at the lowest level, look at it even at the district constituency level, we need to map our costs. GIS, what determines in terms of using heightened information systems. So, in as much as we would want to enhance intervention, and we invest in debt. Because now there are conversations out there where we're saying that for African countries, the environment is now an asset. It's what. So if it's an asset, we look at it differently. We need to manage it because it's what we need. Now, how to manage an asset? So the way we do collecting static officers, it also for environment, how do you get the forest? Is it knowledge, is it which areas, which are the hospitals? You don't even know what's causing that intervention. So even as much as we're on this trial, we need to challenge and invest in debt. Because once we have that, we're able to have timed interventions, even as well as rhizomes know where they are. And financing becomes an issue when you don't have enough. We're talking about losing forests. Where is forest being lost? What's happening? Wetlands are being tempered. So what we need to map out these areas so that when we come, we give you a challenge. One of the MPs in this province, these are the issues. These are the numbers. Then we become change. Thank you so very much. May actually the floor is open for questions. Any possible questions?
Thank you very much, Presenter. Your last comment, Presenter, was on data, trying to identify where interventions need to go. I just want to agree with you that the way we do our budget in Parliament, we actually going into the budget, but going into the budget cycle. So what will happen is that we've now introduced what is called sector budget analysis. Now, sector budget analysis means this committee on local government, for instance, and the local government will be given budget items to look at. The committee on health will be given 10 days to invite witnesses to come and look at those aspects. What you have presented highlights the need now to go beyond that, because our budget is a process, unfortunately. Provinces get money only for administration. So Copperbelt province, if you go to the national budget, we have a figure for admin work. There is no funding for Copperbelt on the specific programs now that deal with the issues we are raising, because we have broken down HDI province by province. Okay, so my point is, I want to agree with you that there are certain things we need to do better. One of them is, how do we do our budgeting beyond just sector budgeting? Because the problems are in provinces. Lastly, your HDI report doesn't indicate what is the standard. It's just saying 0.555 as a figure. Now, for us who are trying to understand what you are presenting, what does 0.55 mean? Does it mean that we're doing fine? Does it mean we're doing poorly? I think you need to clarify that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that question.
Thank you for that presentation. It's not a question, I just have a few talking about climate change. There's been a greater need to develop the climate resilience their infrastructure. And in this infrastructure, leadership is provided by themselves and the parliament. Now, the Minister of Ministry of Health and State Global Health, I can see Dr. Skajun here, are sponsoring the Investment Service for Public Health to develop to train public health specialists, the family physicians. Now, these family physicians are trained at a very high cost. After the become doctors, the 4 years they go to do post-graduates, after which they are meant to go in the districts, in the constituencies where you are. I don't know about this, some of going hospitals, but these are trained to help your doctors on the ground, trained to help your nurses and other health providers to change their attitude at an individual level, in the personal level, at the community level, and the society, and to advise you in governance to ensure that the development of healthcare skills, distribution of supplies, information service, and also in finance. Now, these family physicians are trained in obstetrics, in the surgery, pediatrics, and obstetrics and gynecology. So, meaning where you have more specialists in the Bangalore swamps or in Wembe, you just need one to provide that. The challenge that we have is now we have trained some and they are now just some. For them to get to your constituencies, you need to provide the leadership. One, ask for them through the Ministry of Health. Number two, ensure that there is a post-IT through the cabinet. When you meet the cabinet, post-IT, so that in your constituency, you ask the government, when are you doing family physician? Because those are trained at very high cost. See, the country that is trained at a very high cost. And when you go to one, it's like the commando, you can be able to attend to your constituencies. You don't send them to Saka where they can be dealt with at private. And this is an answer to climate resilience, healthcare infrastructure. It's in your hands and just your ask. When you knock the door, you go to the Minister of Health or the permanent secretary, you say, I want a family physician. They are aware about it, but you do not know how to do that in the constituencies. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Presenter. That was quite insightful. Especially that this report is also linked to the Human Development Index. And I think for me, we are talking about climate change and its effects. We are not supposed to be discussing it in abstract. We should be able to connect it to material health, we should be able to connect it to poverty, we should be able to connect it to agriculture and all the day-to-day situations. So that when you talk to a common person about climate change, the conversation should connect. So if we are discussing it now, without connecting it to the Human Development Index, we'll be losing it out. And it will be difficult to mobilize the social change, community transformation, because people will not be able to connect the conversation. So I love the fact that the report is linking to the health, the poverty status, and the many other factors that connects to the day-to-day well-being of the people. But I just want to comment on the recommendations. So normally when you
are presenting such documents to members of parliament, you should always know that we come from very different backgrounds and our levels of understanding are quite different. So when you make recommendations such as we should strengthen national institutional capacity, no matter what. So me, I would be comfortable if you help us to understand what you mean. Because that sounds a very blanket and general and usual way of presenting recommendations. So if you expected us to have an in-depth understanding, a very focused understanding, and a pragmatic understanding that will give us the next step, it will be very interesting. It will be helpful if you become a bit specific. When you say strengthen national institutional capacity, how does that look like? And what would you want us to do? So that from here we now start conceptualizing how do we, what capacities are you talking about? Which capacities are missing? Which capacities can we prioritize? Also, when you say enhance resource mobilization from domestic financing, are we talking about now CTF financing, climate program? If we can be a bit specific, then we appreciate. Perhaps we can also be able to research further. So if you can be very simple and just give us what you think we can collaborate with the caucus to address some of these issues that you have raised in the communication, it will be very helpful. So that from there we'll be able to pick that this is like when you talk of innovative funding, right? You talked of the green bonds, there you are very specific. But for these others, interesting if the recommendation is very simple, it's actionable, and it's very defined. Then as a caucus, we'll be able to know, okay, where there's a gap in national capacity, the gap is people do not know what carbon trading is. Then we'll focus on that. If we're talking about domestic resources, okay, what are the existing domestic resource avenues? There is CTF, there is this. So that way you'll be able to direct us, and maybe it will be very easy that we start putting these conversations into quick practice. So that's my reflection and my deep thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions?
Thank you so much for a comprehensive presentation. My question is on the human development report. According to the presentation, you said that the last report came out in 2016. So now my question is, how are you able to make policies when you don't even have a report? Because you can't come up with a policy using the 2016 report. A lot of things have happened for instance, from 2022 to date, we have CTF, which we are using in our communities. Meaning a lot of things have changed. Women are being empowered, young people are being empowered. When you come to Calcutta, we have a lot of structures that we never had before 2016. And then the second question is on the your last step on the lifespan said that the female was higher than the male. So I want to know what are the factors that female is higher than male, and then urban provinces it was lower than the rural areas. Like rural areas, we talk of Lusaka province, it's more of urban than Luapula. So in Luapula, the lifespan is higher than Lusaka. So I want to understand what are the factors that are causing all those differences. Thank you.
Okay, so three questions.
Thank you. I'll start with the HDI indicator. It's very broad and complex, but still from the standard practice, one is an ideal. So I think that's the take home look at from our table to see that most of the provinces were below one. Yes. From the start, that's whatever comes with the information that put the health, education, and that. So it's component together. Both the parts, the school. Just don't be just completion now. How long pupils stay in school? So it's now showing the value of education.
So 0.5 is bad.
No, I didn't say it's bad. Then for thank you, Honorable, for issue of capacity, I think I should have broken it down. Like what I earlier mentioned is that if you look at the green growth strategy, is what we as a country we are aspiring to undertake to achieve those desired outcomes. And within that green growth strategy, there are issues of capacity to be dealt with, but nationally, there are issues of training, institutional arrangement, all those that are in place. Because the climate change is an emerging issue. And what has come out from our findings that we concentrate more on national level capacity in terms of new skills, institutional arrangement, governance. But when we go to start provincial and district, it's not there. So, but this is where the point is happening. These issues are happening at the lower level. So the same energies we're putting at the national level, we need to take them down. I think that's where the capacity issue is. The right staff, training the right skills, both in terms of also the governance structure, institutional, so just be strengthened all the way down. The way seven talking about decentralization, that's the lower. Programs, those structure at national going down, this bit is not there. I think this way most of the success. We're taking resources there, but it's little standard quality to manage what you can. So in light of in terms of response, receiving what happens when the disaster came in, issues of capacity, we need to strengthen those structures. Resources should be provided. For the Madam, yes, the 2016 report, the 7th report, the current one, this is the latest one. Indeed, what the lag in terms of developing these reports. Like I said, ordinarily, at a proper level, every year, there's a human development report, which is published by the MGM. But each country, the international tax practice every 2 years. Because like you are rightly saying, you can cut so we need to report it. The challenge has been like in my last submission of the problem in terms of data we can't invest. Because if we don't have the data, plan becomes difficult and come up with evidence-based policy. So part of the lessons, we've been using administrative data for the last years from institutions, what they're collecting, the Ministry of Health, we were able to collect administrative data. Patients attended to that, but in terms of formalizing the report, having data. Currently, we managed to do that because for the 2020 census report, we have a living condition survey and a heritage report. So those are the options to come up with a price report. But going forward, that was my last submission that we need to, through all members of parliament, we want to do that we invest in data in our country, across all the sectors. Now that the environment has come as a government challenge, we need to invest in terms of branch statistics around this. Then, interestingly, on the life expectancy, quite difficult to, but it is, I think it's from the reports, it's a life part. Your lifestyle in urban areas as well. There's within actually look at. Those are some of the issues that are. But that also now informs us that those body size, all the questions. How come I think you're living wrong now? but your life expectancy is short, and also your real estate is low. And they don't have the good facilities. So it comes out to we need to actually collectively look at how can we change the narrative. We think we're in Lusaka and I'm down now, but then look at the numbers that they're giving us other ones. So it's a very, very good thought to unpack some of those issues that actually invest more in our rural areas. They can actually do longer than us. Probably yes.
Thank you so very much. And I think also just to the question from Honorable Member from Afwe, where she was asking about the 2016 report. Chikanga. Yes. How could I forget? So basically, the last report was 2016. So, but this one is the same report was launched in June. So, 2016, that's almost 10 years. 9 years, there have been no such a report. But now we have a new report, which we are encouraging members of parliament to make reference to, because it looked at all the provinces. So what we'll do is share with Sylvester the report so that he is able to share on the WhatsApp group where you are as members of parliament, or alternatively, we can send to you via email so that it will help even as you are trying maybe to mainstream climate change into your constituency development plans. We can get to 2 questions. Because the next presentation is Director in Economy is going to make a presentation.
Thank you so much. Brilliant, David. I just want to find out because these reports are very important, and when you come up with these reports, they are not just for the SACA. Has this report been disseminated in the provinces?
Thank you very much. I'm glad that NCR recognizes that a big issue. That also does recognize that developing policies such as developing EDC as well as the legal structure helps to ensure that the country gets on track to provide, for example, the 805,000 also contribute to carbon emissions. What the HDI uses measures the country's development level, it also does have some limitation in terms of, for example, it does not take into account the income inequality, as well as measure other important aspects of human development, for example, political freedom, environmental sustainability, and gender inequality. What are some of the weaknesses of this human development report? That's number one. Secondly, while the HDI also provides valuable insights in terms of human development, it also does have limitations. For example, reliance on aggregate data that mask inequalities, for example, in certain countries. And how does this help in terms of focusing on limited set of indicators and its inability to capture qualitative aspects of well-being and development, as well as how can we, you as an institution that is implementing this report, how are you doing it to ensure that the implementation of HDR avoid these pitfalls?
Okay, so we need one question so that he responds. We are going to
thank you so much for your given the circumstances under which this report, what one key issue would you highlight as representative of with respect to the purpose? Thank you.
you may respond to the question.
I think I was the last one, the human rights one. Look at what sharing report on some of the indicators of the report. So I am going to present myself and respond to that. I know I mentioned earlier when asked the question. HDI is broad and complex. I think following up calling questions in terms of other aspects like environmental stability, campus distribution, and the like. Yes, indeed, especially campus distribution, it's a big issue because it now brings up the issue of inequality, which I think the other slide is actually brought up, where we looked at the urban. Now, what is the impact of climate change for the out of the water? This is due to show the level of resilience at the lowest level of state, our level now, urban, but in terms of the income. But I think it will require an income because I remember last time about mentioning poverty to agree in terms of the poverty, which are the close of the UN global countries, because we need to agree both all the stakeholders of what will be mountain poverty, which brings out policies of income and life. I think I think it's absolutely all those issues to look at that conversation. It is a composite together, what you're doing. I think those should be some of our takeaways. How do we enhance the report? I think those are issues now. Particularly that the other aspects of the system is more, which now brings issues of human rights aspects. So maybe our take from having not done the report almost the last 9 years, we got something to be done, what's supposed to provide. But I think if we start compensating now, that can provide report. How to enhance this report bring out those issues? So human rights and those are some of the issues. So that the report is more rich and very encompassing. In terms of dissemination, madam, dissemination is currently underway. Our colleagues also doing traveling to Solwezi. One I know that Copper Belt, Southern, Central, the Eastern, of that. So it's like that. Could have a condition finance and secretary to the board.
Thank you so much. Yes, so UNDP actually have sent in their projects they are supposed to be here. Also to speak in this presentation. So as the consortium of CSO, actually we are also with UNDP. So as I mentioned in the morning, the organization is not a member of this consortium. This is the first time to become a member because they're growing big and doing better things. At this moment, we've got, I think, 30 minutes to go for closing. We are now getting to our last presentation so that we don't have any carryovers to tomorrow. And Director, Green Economy and Climate Change is going to make that presentation.
Very good. Where I image of the player. This basically is you order for an update of the systems of policies and strategies that we have in the industry. And this is why this presentation and start for example, some green strategy. So, how give a brief on the national policy of climate change that reflects specific policy of climate change that's implemented. Prior to that, both finding environmental policies and putting everything there. For example, the national environment of 2007 is what scattered for climate change. This policy in 2016 is therefore important. The first specific policy on climate change. Then the act that you recently passed, the Economy and Climate Change Act, talk about the guidelines including benefit sharing mechanisms and carbon registry. Then the National Determinant Contribution Agency with that prepare this every 5 years. We are just preparing the third version this year, but we are very close to submission and this the National Adaptation Plan 2023 is our roadmap for future resilience and our conclude the National Green Growth Strategy of 2024. And as I said, this can go attached to the people they are not quite. Okay, if we go to the national policy on climate change, that's the document you see on the right, and it was formulated in 2016, as I said, provided an umbrella policy framework for addressing climate change. One unique feature of climate change is that it is not sector specific. Because it is cross-cutting, you have to encompass all the sectors within this policy. Even though you have sector-specific policies, for example, you have policy on water, you have policy on forestry, you have policy on energy and all that, but climate change cuts across all these. You must have provision on this, and that's why it provides an umbrella framework for addressing climate change in all these sectors. But it also created an institutional framework for coordinated because of this cross-sectoral aspect of climate change implementation is that it is a framework. This policy created a coordinated structure. When the Council of Ministers acted, chaired by the Vice President, then you had the steering committee of permanent secretaries, and below that you had the technical committee on climate change. What has changed in the act when we come to the act that we had is that these structures you now only have the Council of Ministers at the top, still chaired by the Vice President, and below that you have a technical committee. The steering committee of permanent secretaries, which was intended, was removed. So that's the policy, the national policy on climate change. The Green Economy and Climate Change Act number 18 of 2024, as you recall, honorable members, this act provides for climate change adaptation, disaster risk action, provides for climate change mitigation, law mitigation development, green economy, and related actions, regulating carbon markets, provides for environmental and social safeguards, climate change action, establishes the climate change fund, domesticates the United Nations Global Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement, and provides for matters stated from or connected to the compound. So that's the principle of the act that you enacted. Now, in terms of the status as I indicated earlier during the questions, we have started working on the regulations or statutory instruments. And so far, we have completed the carbon market regulations, which is in place. It is in these regulations where we have specified. Sorry. Yes, Honorable, we apologize, but we are almost, as I said, the regulations are finalized. I'll touch on a few. For example, I think there was a specific question of the benefit sharing. This is the most topical when it comes to company. We have looked at countries and how they have addressed benefit sharing mechanisms. The issue is when a carbon project is being implemented, and particularly for nature-based projects, mostly forestry related, there is a lot of community participation. The communities are the custodians of these forests up to that stage. And they are the ones who change the practices so that they are employing sustainable forest management practices to reduce the emissions. They have to change their agricultural practice to ensure that the emissions are reduced. And therefore, there should be a fair benefit sharing mechanism. How much is going to go to the communities and what structure are you going to follow in applying that? Countries have taken different approaches on benefit sharing mechanisms. Ourselves, we are piloting some under the jurisdiction project in this province that David referred to. In some cases, it's a percentage where you say the project breakdown of benefit sharing is going to be in the following categories. For example, you could say 55% you go to the communities. How you break down that to goes to the communities is a detail because there are categories there. Something we go to the traditional leader, our chiefs, something we go to specific issues, maybe employing guards and all that is in wildlife area. So you have that breakdown of the benefits, and that is that. Then 30%, for example, I'm just describing how this is done in some cases. You say 30% will go to the project developer. That is what the project developer uses in their operations, but you may also have specific for operations. Now, where the issue is with benefit sharing is that it is very difficult to apply one standard format to all different projects in a carbon market. It is easier to work out benefit sharing for nature-based projects, like I said, forest-based projects, for example, because you can clearly demonstrate community participation, and therefore, because it is based on communities being custodians and their participation in the project. But to give you an example, if you have Sri Lanka Cement for Agriculture's sake are implementing a project to enhance, we are talking about reducing emissions. They want to invest the technology in their cement production so that the emissions reduce. And they implement that, they reduce the emissions, and they are selling those credits to get revenue. How much or what justification would there be for the communities around Sri Lanka to claim the benefit? Or in the event that yes, you establish that yes, the communities around should get some benefits from this project, is it going to be the same percentage as you would put for a forest project where communities are controlling fire, for example, they are putting up fire breaks, they have stopped accessing certain forest products because they don't want to contribute to emissions and all that? The answer is no, because technology-based projects are landed by the project developers, and any benefits that you put to approve to surrounding communities who are participating may not be at the same level as you put other projects. So because of that, in some countries such as Tanzania, what we have done is a segregated approach where they indicate that in this project the percentage is this, in these other projects the percentage is this, so that you cover for Tanzania. What they have done is for forest-related projects they put a percentage, and then they say for any other projects the percentage will be determined. Now, that also is problematic. So what is proposed in our course, we presented this at validation with stakeholders, and that's the what is important is to have an agreed benefit sharing. Of course, you have standard guidelines on what a benefit sharing plan should contain. So you determine that any project that is being supported must have an agreed benefit sharing plan. Means that benefit sharing plan, when you say it is agreed, it is signed by stakeholders, including the communities around that they have agreed to this benefit sharing plan. Of course, guidelines, like at the moment, we do have a template from the stakeholders under the jurisdiction, where the communities are getting 55%, that's what is provided in that. The project developer gets 30%, and I think 15%, if I'm not mistaken, goes for operations. So definitely we'll be making reference to that. So what it means, our role now, as we receive projects, one is to look at the legitimacy of the benefit sharing plan that is submitted by the project developer, and also confirm, has this been reached consensus with the full participation of the communities, and the communities have agreed to the plan. We need minutes that are signed and attached to that plan. But that is one side. The carbon market is a very complex field, and it's very evolving every day. We need to update ourselves in what is happening. So how do we expect the communities to be at speed with this sophisticated project implementers who are most important because of the capital intensity? Is it a very fair negotiation where you expect the project developers, very advanced, hiring very expensive consultants to go and sit in the village with the village headman chairing the meeting and agree on a fair benefit sharing plan with the communities? And that's why it calls for capacity building. We need to strengthen the capacity of our communities to be able to negotiate. If possible, we need even the representatives who can be with the communities to tell them, warn them about some of the pitfalls, how they can be duped and all that. And unfortunately, government alone may not do that task. And this is where our appeal to civil society organizations are, because we work closely with the communities, that will be required to strengthen the capacity of the communities to understand the agreements that they are signing and the importance of the benefits being clearly defined. For example, one of the challenges we see is where only applies public works. We are going to construct a road, we are going to put up a school, we are going to put up a clinic, and probably market. Well, very good. But we know that the only thing that changes livelihoods and which will help the family adjust their livelihoods, stop the unsustainable practices that they are doing, is what affects their household income. So how much is going to the household in cash? And that is what is very important. So the role is for both government and civil society to help our communities to be able to negotiate these benefit sharing plans and ensure that they are not cheated. It would be unfair if we give this entirely to the communities to negotiate, because they are not at the same level with sophisticated carbon project developers. I think this sorry to take a bit of time was to just explain where we have the draft regulations are in place with this, and the benefit sharing plan has been, benefit sharing mechanism has been tailored in the way that we demand an agreed and signed benefit sharing plan attached to the end of the project, so that we are able to interrogate the plan and see the adequacy of what has been provided. If we are not happy during the review that this is not fair, if the communities are signed, then we send it back and probably provide support for sensitization in the communities for how that can be strengthened. Yeah, the next one is a nationally determined contribution. I think because I touched on this in the presentation, under the Paris Agreement, national determined contribution are the vehicles that countries use to implement the Paris Agreement provisions. And these are 5-year plans which have to be revised and updated. Zambia is just at the tail end of preparing our NDC 3.0. The only important part is that this NDC 3.0, which countries are developing now, are going up to 2030. And we know 2030 is a milestone. There are a number of milestones that have to be achieved by 2030. For example, Sankuwa was referring to the sustainable goals. Those have to be achieved in 2030. So at SDG 13, there is climate action, which is being placed. And so these are very important. And also, the international community is struggling to ensure that we keep global warming or the average increase in temperature to 2 degrees Celsius. If we can do better, if 1.5 degrees Celsius, because that's what is considered safe going forward. So we can only achieve those in these actions. And that is why they're important. Now, it's a requirement that as a country, each subsequent NDC that you submit must show progression in terms of ambition. We call this ratcheting up, meaning you need to be progressive going forward. Okay. Yeah, this is just the implementation framework. I think I was in my discussion with some of the colleagues, I was emphasizing that the NDC, the document that we submit, is a policy document and with a particular template, but then after that, we develop an implementation framework like this, complete with budgeting, with the cost. This is where we have a lot of detail with the cost. For example, the NDC 2.0, we had quoted it at $17.2 billion as a requirement. The 1.0 had a budget of $50 billion for implementation. That is in the implementation which comes after the activities. Maybe just to share the features, the key features of the NDC 3.0 which Zambia is going to submit. We've actually already made a provisional submission. Submitted a provision in March, 10th March 2025, because they were acquired by February, but we made a provisional submission as we are finalizing and consolidating. So the key features are that Zambia has maintained its high ambition of an unconditional pledge of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 25% from our 2010 levels, and to achieve that by 2030, and that we can increase this ambition to 47% premised on substantial external support. Now, just to indicate, this is highly calibrated advantage. But when we say we reduce our emission by 25%, sometimes there is a misunderstanding that we are saying this is purely by domestic efforts or resources from the treasury. No, we mean with the level of support that we are receiving in 2015 when we developed our initial NDC. So we take the business as usual scenario, it was in 2015. So the level of support that we are receiving by 2015, if there is no change, then we can achieve 25%. But we said if there is substantial external support, and that substantial external support is quantified. For example, in the NDC 1.0, when we had the budget of $50 billion, we said 35 billion will come from external sources and 15 billion from domestic sources. So that is clearly defined, and that's what we mean by that. So our target, if you like, is 25% as unconditional and 47% as conditional, based on the 2010 as our baseline. But to achieve this in 2030, we are progressively moving forward. The country has increased its ambition through broadening the scope. In the first NDC, we had 3 sectors. In the second NDC, 6 sectors. We have now moved to 10 sectors. The new sectors that tourism, infrastructure, industrial processes that we are actually managing some of the factories like the cement factories to reduce on the emissions of the use of clean production. Basically, that's the example of the site of benefit share. So we are moving towards an economy-wide approach because it's basically at 8 sectors where this can happen sectors of the economy, and this is what is expected. We consider this as we have ratcheted up. We are progressively increasing our ambition both in sectors, but also in implementation by sourcing funding for adaptation remains a key component of success, and we have strengthened this component, including one of the indicators. One of the key things that we can do is to be able to measure progress and how you are building resilience, and this is what we are doing under this development indicators that try to progress these sectors. Yeah, the National Adaptation Plan, this is the tool for building resilience, and this was funded through the Green Climate Fund, which we have developed. This is targeting 9 sectors, as listed there. You have agriculture, health, water, and infrastructure, among others. The NAM is intended to strengthen institutional coordination, integrating adaptation planning and budgeting, mobilizing resources, and establishing monitoring and evaluation. Was prepared in 2023 that identifies 9 sectors as the most vulnerable impacts of climate change, including water, agriculture, forestry, energy, health, infrastructure, tourism, water, and mining. Now, when you look at these are clear what I can get in the agency. Yeah, meaning that in some sectors we have to ensure that we undertake all adaptation and mitigation, and these are provided for in the NAM. The resource estimate, and on our needs to ensure that you support the needs in terms of resource allocation. Just the number of, I remember for the NDC, I got to $17 billion over that period of time. For the NAM, because the NAM implementation period is from 2023 to 2025, 2035, goes beyond 2030. We need $34.7 billion. These figures are not trained. We undertake engage consultants to project what will be the climate scenarios in 2025 or 2050. And based on models, they project what the climate scenario is. And then we say, if we are to intervene, what measures are we supposed to do as interventions to reduce these impacts associated with this scenario? And they give you the interventions that are required. And then that's when you come to the cost. What will be the resource requirement? And that's where we reach at these figures. So $34.7 billion, I know it comes with some shock, but based on the assessment, that's the resource that is required to build our resilience for the 9 sectors up to the year 2035. The last one is the National Green Growth Strategy, and this is the one I said is an attached to this, and therefore this is a document, the most recent strategic document that was developed in 2024, or the Green Growth Agenda for this administration is important, and we have to develop a vehicle that is going to help us implement that, and that's where the National Green Growth Strategy comes. So it's a model that promotes growth, resilient economy, social inclusion and human well-being, and efficient resource use. It has 3 pillars: resilient and climate change compatible growth, that's 1, 4 pillars, enhanced resource efficiency, enhanced natural capital, and improved inclusivity. Improved inclusivity, this is where we ensure that you do not leave anyone behind. Ensure that everyone is involved. The youths, actually, a lot of these strategies when we started formulating, we ensure that the also speaking. Here, the youth on the podium also spoke. And throughout the process, we involved the youth differently the board, because we cannot achieve sustainable, better, great growth without the involvement of all players. And so it is like in the country's Vision 2030 and the International Development Plan. It also includes strategies for strengthening policy, mobilizing financial resources, enhancing technical capacity, and fostering innovation to achieve these objectives. I think the key are those pillars. When we talk of resilient and climate compatible growth. You can have growth, economic growth. But if it is not resilient, what happens when we experience external shocks? And by external shocks, we don't just mean climate change. We saw what the COVID-19 did to the economies. Those are some of the shocks that we are looking at. How does the economy ensure that it is resilient to such external shocks? And that is the resilience, but it also has to be climate compatible. We saw again just the recent drought we had on how it can change the trajectory of the development. The entire budget planned to just focus on that. Is there anything we can do different to ensure that even when that event occurs, because our development is climate compatible, we are able to withstand that? Enhanced resource efficiency. It has been noted that we are not very efficient in how we use resources. And here we don't just need the funds. It's not even about funds. It's our natural resources. When trees are in the environment from Senanga, Honorable Sefu, which spoke, she talked about Mandy was towards, yes.
No.
She talked about timber production and how it's not together. When people come to cut timber, they just take the leaf and everything is there. The branches and all that are just left to come and be destroyed by the fire. That's what we are saying. We say that's not efficient use of resources. Can we ensure that resources, we must find use for all the components of our resources, add value within the country, because when you are adding value, then you are going to utilize the byproducts as well. And so it is about recycling the circular economy to ensure that even in the waste that is produced at one stage of processing is used in that, so that you are not throwing away much. That's the resource efficiency pillar. Enhanced natural capital is about human development. Again, it's in the presentation of the human development report. What human skills are we going to require to implement this for the green economy? Are the skills that we have at the moment adequate for us to implement this? Who are the technocrats that we have, and specifically for small and medium enterprises, who are the skilled labor that we have? We have a situation now where everyone is going so, but who are the installers we have? Who are the people who are going to undertake repairs when you have challenges with this? So those great skills that are is what we are talking about. We've had a lot of cases of some enterprise, they are solar panels, they invent but at very high cost, and then they call the ordinary electrician from the who says that no boss was any starts installing. Within the process of installing, that thing blows up and they invent that is exploded. Because we are not using the relevant skills. So it is those green skills that we are and how they use. Again, I talk about financial resources and ways. That should be the last. That's changing. Yes, that's the last slide in terms of the policies and strategies. Just to indicate that for policies and strategies, we normally have to revisit them because the situation changes quite quickly, and we want to ensure that you are responsible to the changing situation. Therefore, these policies come under review quite often. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. This presentation is a very important presentation because it looks at existing policies and the regulations. So, as we are about to wind up, anyone with the questions? Okay. Bye. Especially those that are not.
Thank you very much. So my name is Zanji Senkala. I work with TVZ. My question was on the point where you talked about Zambia being committed to reducing emissions by 25%. So, of course, this is mitigation effort. But I wanted to find out how the private sector is being leveraged That's number one. And in this same question, what incentives are being put? What incentives are being put to? Yes, I need to come to me. But yeah, so how is the private sector being leveraged? And then what incentives are being put to attract that investment from the private sector? That's one thing. But also when it comes to energy security, for instance, because you talked about instant crops and all of that. When it comes to Zambia, obviously we know that about 90% primarily we rely on hydroelectricity. But when we look at Ethiopia and the GERD, Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which was recently commissioned, that was, I think, primarily domestic funded, and that's going to help them produce a lot of electricity in a nutshell. So politics aside, how could we emulate something like that? Is that something that we can emulate maybe in the next 5 to 10 years? What will it take?
But you can write them 6.0. And this will get a sense because the
Thanks. Director, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm glad you touched on the issue of agreement sharing for carbon trading, because one of the precious issues that we see, well, one, the bicarbon partners have really abandoned when it comes to voluntary agreements. And you will see the level of inconsistencies that happens around the carbon market. For example, in EU, the same tonnage of carbon trading is costing about 149 euros per ton, as opposed to 8 euros in Africa. Sure, speaking. And we keep on saying, to some extent, we feel as a human rights organization, these are post solutions. But we are glad that government is going in that direction of commencing or coming up with a legal process that can commence the carbon trading, because we know that communities are really not having a share. There are benefits of this. So, Isaac.
Thank you for that. So just a quick question to the director and just on the presentation. So my advice on the issue of figures, especially for the national independence contributions. So I think the 2.4 targets that we have set, for example, with the additional sectors that we've added. So are we saying that when it comes to our greenhouse gas inventory, that our greenhouse gases have increased as a country? And are we planning on still being as ambitious as we want to be in terms of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions? And also looking at how recent work has been done with capacity council in terms of building the capacity for government staff on how they can actually really work on having that inventory done at a large scale, not only just within those but also other districts and other municipalities. Is that also still being done by the ministry? And then I think maybe my last question is just around the mainstreaming guidelines that the ministry is also planning on undertaking. I think from the discussions that we've had from morning until now, we're still seeing a big disjoint between the ministries in terms of coordination and action. So is that something that we are still planning on undertaking as a country? Thank you, Director. That is really good. I think, we've been having a conversation in the health sector. I feel like it's a conversation that we brought out here. And I attended the NDC stakeholders meeting on Friday. And I think I just want to highlight, from the health sector, how we still feel that health hasn't fully been highlighted in the NDC. I know there was a response to the meeting to say, there was a big focus on big emitters, and like you have said, just about mitigation, but not forget is that the adaptation aspect is still going to end up to the health system and health structure. With the current NDC 3.0, it does have some bits of health that are covered during bits and pieces, rush and so on, but we're not looking at the health system holistically. We've looked at a few other NDCs in other countries which see the health system has been highlighted holistically. Is there a role of how, as Zambia, are we addressing, health holistically and not just overlooking it at a small cross section? Because, if there's hunger, climate issues, there's no food, it's still going to end to malnutrition, it's still going to end to terrible health.
Those are my 5 questions. So, so the questions that you answered, I want to go
Thank you very much. I promise that I will be brief and I think here in the house, that's quite some appetite for discussion. So the question is elections and the participation of private because it's not which is going to change the action of conditions. And it's also recognized globally that the role of the private sector in climate change is important. Treasury is simply not enough, it's resources from the private sector which will drive most of this. To just cite an example, the carbon market, those bilateral agreements that I was sharing, for how they be implemented by the private sector. They are the ones who implementing the projects and getting the revenues. And so government is providing conducive policy environment and creating those linkages which are required so that the private sector participates. On the tax incentive, on the incentives program, you said, I would want to operate on that very my colleagues and but just to get that already, there are steps that are, for example, there are some taxes that are waived or reduced for renewable energy technologies. That is one way of ensuring that the private sector participates fully and contributes to addressing climate change. On the issue of the Ethiopian, yes, it's a huge gap. I think historically, not only the continent, it's one of the largest dams, and yes, dams with their domestic resources, which is huge. But I think we are also doing a lot of things that sometimes we underestimate. In renewable energy, for example, we have a lot of projects that are ongoing. Copperbelt Energy Corporation, for example, just successfully issued a bond, and they're investing that bond in solar technology on the Copperbelt. There is a GP and another plant. We also have the Chisamba, which was just being launched recently. The challenge in our case for hydro is that, of course, we realized it's not sustainable, but in a number of areas. We know how vulnerable we are. And so there is this move to increase the ratio of the other renewable technologies in our energy mix as a way of ensuring that we are resilient. So we are doing investments. It may not be huge dam investments like Ethiopia, but these renewable energy projects, particularly solar, stand alone grids so that you decentralize the energy and ensure that we can achieve energy efficiency. We will be doing more, but certainly we are doing, we are only to start in terms of addressing. Private sector, key, if you come to our implementation framework, we collaborate with this. We ensure that the private sector is involved and participates in contributing to the details. Here, the costing of the NDC, I'm not sure if I got the detail here. What I got is your question is, has the NDC 3.0 already been posted? No, there are estimates, yes. Some consultants are coming up with some estimates, but remember what we do is after we develop the ABC as we have done, then we go into the detailed implementation framework and the investment plan. It's the implementation framework where we go into the details. What are the interventions? Where will these interventions be done? What are the cost estimates? That's when we come up with the cost. So we haven't costed the MPC now, but we already have a consultant who's going to help spearhead this. So immediately after we submit, we will start the process of developing the implementation framework, and after that, an investment plan. Caesar, yes, on the benefit sharing, you are right, inconsistencies that you refer to a lot of players, the lack of transparency, and that's exactly what the act and the regulations that we have developed is going to address. Everything is going to be online. And by the way, I didn't talk about the registry. We are developing a registry at SEMA. All transactions in the capital market will have to pass through the registry. SEMA has to trigger when the transaction is done. The agreements that we have signed with these countries are top-notch. These are referred to as A-rated countries in the capital market. Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, including Singapore. They demand that there is a high level of transparency, including putting everything on our websites. So everything will be transparent. We are going to know how much each project developer has sold the capital because they have to report that. We will know the volumes, starting from the volumes. So we know the volumes that they have sold. We will know the amount that they have paid, and therefore it becomes very easy to go back to the benefit sharing and say, you agreed on these ratios. Your revenue is this much. How much have you given the operators? And that's the importance of that. That our members go to request. Inonge, yeah, I think Inonge's question is bordering on whether we have enhanced our ambition. If we have protected the sectors and the targets have remained the same, how are we dealing with this? I think it's important to look at how we set the targets. What you do is you project your emissions. When I say the 2010 baseline, you are looking at what were the emissions in 2010. But it's not against that you are reducing. Because 2010 certain emissions were low. If I'm not mistaken, the emissions were around 140,000 gigagrams in 2010. But what you do is you project these emissions based on a number of factors. For example, population growth, the GDP growth, how will this be in 2050 or 2030, for example? And because of this, what are the likely emissions? So you project how your emissions are going to be 2030 in this case. Say 2030, our emissions are going to be this much. That's when you start working backwards. What should we do to reduce these emissions? So it's a forward-looking baseline, if you like. Because it's a forward-looking baseline, we would want to broaden the sectors that contribute to achieve these targets that we have set. But another important reason is that as a country, we are very ambitious in 2015, 2016. The targets that we have is still very ambitious. And we think that we are not under obligation to increase those targets and still for development, basically. So what we have done is a decent thing as a country, stick to the high targets that we set, broaden the sectors that are contributing to achieving that, and hope that we achieve these targets in the year 2030 as planned. Yeah, maybe yes, we are still having conversations here. It's an important point. As I said, we'll look at this, but it's the template. I think one thing that I want to explain is the challenge we have within this as a policy document is a template, and with a matrix that clearly requests you what you put in there. So you are limited to how much detail you put it. We consider it as an anchor. Once we mention a sector with some detail, then we elaborate the implementation framework in terms of how that is going to be addressed. But we are looking at the discussions we are having to see how best we can capture that in terms of building on the health. But it's a very important sector that has always reflected in our document. I think those are the questions that I have.
Thank you very much, Director and Member of Parliament for some of our constituencies. I think the questions I wanted to ask someone that seems you have answered. I just wanted to know how you came up with the percentage of 25% in terms of emissions. Is there a figure? We have a figure to say this is the amount of emissions we want for us to come up with that 25%. And I would also like to find out from that who are these major contributors to this emissions and what is that going to help out the sort of the situation. And especially this carbon trading issue. Has it got side effects in the long run? Because I would like to understand that does it mean that these countries will be trading, they will be coming to afford their carbon gains? Has it got the side effects in the long run? And I submit it. Thank you. Oh, my. There are 400. What we do? Yes. Okay, just be brief.
Thank you so much, Michael. Then from the carbon markets that are happening in Eastern Province and the challenges presented, and I'm aware that currently this is a conversation with the World Bank to establish another carbon market in the northern region, specifically. Given the complexity of the issues surrounding carbon credits, and for me, I view it as license for polluters. In other words, because as Zambia, we don't need those carbon, but the polluters need them so that they can equally leverage on their nationalization, putting some of the production mechanisms that they're doing. Given that background, to what extent do you think the carbon market should be able to apply the real benefits, given that so far all the carbon credits that we've done have not contributed to the NDCs? Because remember, once the carbon is sought, it cannot be accounted for your NDCs as a country. It means it has gone to another country. To what extent are we ensuring that those carbon credits, first of all, benefits the communities which we are concerned about, and especially, I mean, this is the shrinking funding space which we heavily rely on, and that would ensure that we protect the rights of communities. Thank you so much.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is from Carter Center. I was glancing over your National Green Growth Strategy document, and it talks about how the Constitution provides for and promotes ecologically sustainable development through the protection, conservation, and sustainable utilization of natural resources, and forbids wastefulness, among others. So my question is, to what extent do you bring in ministries that are aligned to what it is that you want to achieve, keeping in mind the economic development and sustainable development goals that we have as a country?
Okay, so yes, when we were talking about the national executive's contributions, he talked about these contributions to growth for change sector, but when it comes to the growth strategy,
they reduced to 9. So I was wondering which sector has fallen and why. And then, well, deforestation, and in particular on Chaco Bay, is one of the key drivers of this issue of climate change. I wanted to find out practically what we are doing also to build some resilience around that, apart from this issue of carbon trading, which to me sounds like it's neither here nor there.
It's not
Okay. Yes. Thank you. My question is the agreements that the cabinet ministry has signed. We have seen them on the website, but are we likely to have the actual agreements on the website for us? Those of you in charge.
So, I think more like about 3 questions that we.
Honorable Company, thank you for the question. The 25% emission reductions and whether it's expensive. Yes, I thought with good protections, with our growing and with the changes we grow, you protect that they are what that we use. What we are changes in 2020, for example, we understand that any work back. So the 25% is equivalent to 38,000 gigagrams of carbon dioxide equivalent. So in absolute terms, so it means with that calculation that said we need to reduce this amount, this volume of emissions by 2030 using the source. And of course, this is with reference to the absolute figure that you see in 2030 based on the modules that on carbon trading and side effects again, it's an important question. Yes, there are side effects to carbon trading. First of all, the way carbon trading was introduced, it was supposed to be supplementary. It is what's supposed to supplement what these countries do in their jurisdictions. For example, if Germany or Switzerland and Sweden have a target, they have been given a target to say you reduce emissions by this, and then they look at their actions within their countries. They say, yes, we can, but to help us achieve this, we need some flexibility. Can we implement a project in a developing country to contribute to meeting our target? And then we provide sustainable development in that country. That's the key. So we are not saying they are not dumping our carbon dioxide in Zambia, except they are implementing a project in Zambia which reduces emissions here in Zambia. But because remember it's a shared atmosphere, it has the same effect as if it is in their country. But what is important is that the benefits that should come to Zambia should be tangible and substantial. That's why we focus on clear benefit sharing mechanisms, because our benefit is sustainable development. For example, they must be technology that is going to help us, so that, and that technology, if possible, should be assembled within them, so that it is even creating jobs and result in technology transfer, apart from creating jobs and income. But they should also not transfer the entire burden to someone. They have to reduce emissions in their country as much as possible, but only a percentage, that's when they come to the market to supplement. So the data that is there, if we are not clear, because we also now have targets, we can do what is called oversell. We can oversell our credits and find that we are unable to meet our percentages that we've talked about. Because as indicated by one colleague, when you sell these credits, and particularly you apply what we call corresponding adjustment, meaning those credits that you have sold, will be used by the country where they are going in their NDC. It means Zambia cannot count those credits towards our increase. So what you do in the transaction, when I said SEMA will be triggering the same, it means you credit our registry and debit their registry. Meaning they have reduced emissions in their country. We have increased emissions in ours. And so we need to provide the numbers there and ensure that we don't fail to meet our targets by overselling. That's one issue that, and that's why the registry is very important. You can eye on that. But it's not all the credits that you sell that result in corresponding adjustment. If a private company, an airline, for example, buys credits here to offset their carbon footprint, and those credits will not be used by the country where they operate or anyone towards their NDC, then we count those credits in our NDC. So the key thing is, are these credits going to be applied? We call them international transfer of education outcomes, or ITMOs. Are these ITMOs going to be used in the NDC of another country or not? But so the key thing is, they should, if they are being used by another country, then we don't count them in our NDC. And that's why we have to care for that. We don't solve the problem of other countries and leave our better, because we've been told that something not 5%. Meanwhile, we have helped the other countries to meet that. So the corresponding adjustment, the balance is basically it's the same between the credit and debit. The only difference is in this case, you credit the country that is selling the credit, and you debit the one who has received. Because the target member is to reduce the emissions.
In the morning, in the morning constituency, can they understand what you're explaining? Or confused?
We have attempted, Honorable Minister, we have simplified. I think the communities may not need to understand some of the levels of
yeah.
But what they need to understand is what you need to do, or what to treat in your practices. And because of this, the benefits you get are what you pay for. Obviously, you will not take them to corresponding adjustment, the registry, and it goes that will be over their head. But the important thing is, but to you as legislators, I want to be detailed so that you are able to provide, when we say, because the question asked by one company is very important. Are there issues? Yes, there can be issues. And the issues are that we can oversell and then fail to meet our target. Michael, the challenges, of course, the idea is to relate to experiences from the jurisdiction where we apply. Is in the new jurisdiction, mostly, yes, we are very conservative by the nature of our nature of what we know that a lot of ministries are on board because we simply don't achieve anything. You saw the sectors that unless they are formed, we can't do anything. The honorable, sorry, I forgot the name. The comparison, and that's very good because it shows the level of attention that you pay. In the NDC, I talk about 10 sectors. But in the green growth strategy, I talk about 9 sectors. And the question is why and which sector has fallen off? The sector that is not reflected in the NDC at the moment is mining. The rest of the sectors, if you go to the NDC and the NAP, the rest of the sectors are in both documents. And this is because there's a difference between adaptation and mitigation. For the NAP, we are focusing on adaptation. There are issues that need to be done there. Yes, there is mitigation that needs to be done in mining, but it doesn't come as a sector on its own. Because in the guidelines that we use, they are under the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the guidelines. That is covered, the emissions that are reduced under mines are covered under the category, if you saw it, it was called industrial processes and products, IPPUs. So that is covered there, and that's why the sectors do not match 10 to 10. Yeah, I think the last one was the agreements, and are they going to be on the website? Yes, I think I already indicated that these will be on the website, including the numbers that will be developed out of those. All those will be on their website. Because transparency, as I said, the countries we are signing and ourselves, the credibility of the carbon market is what is key for you to be attractive. So we need to be as transparent as we possibly can. And stakeholders need to see what is being transacted and what are the sectors, where the resources going. So that Transparency International does not point fingers to say, oh, no, how much can we and where did this go? So yes, all these. Director of programs, I hope I'm confident.
He deserves a round of applause. Session. As I earlier mentioned, honorable members, as I earlier mentioned, Mr. Shetima is the nation.
Yeah.
He is AI. If there are champions in this space, that is human history. Some of us, when we were joining this space in 2009, who was already there for so many years. And leading 54 countries in Africa as the chair of the African Group of Negotiators, also advising heads of state. He has got immense experience. And this is not just a workshop. We are going to learning workshop. Even me, who feels I'm an expert in climate change, I want to learn it. So now, this language, we can't take it to the community. They would feel like we are wasting their time. But I think for us who are here, because we are looking also the negotiators, you know, to so that we're able to negotiate. As earlier mentioned, if you want to be a great planner, a development expert, a great politician, begin to follow issues of climate change. Because they are bordering on all the sectors of the economy. I know lawyers, they say they call themselves the learned, right? The learned, obviously, they deal with acts, they you know, it's some things. If it's a matter, it's same law, it's whatever it is. But I can assure you, climate change is just happening. We have not even, what we have covered here is not even 5% of the things that which we are supposed to cover in detail. If we look at the science part of it, in detail, each sector, I mean, we will be here for 2 weeks. So, so I think certain individuals in this room, they deserve presidential honors. And I think we are going to start, like, we will not be that time, members of parliament, so that certain individuals are honored for their dedication in this country, including myself. Any housekeeping rules before we close officially?
We don't know to leave. Where do we get all these presentations?
Yeah.
Yes. Is there? Okay. No problem. Share with the Sylvester so that everything is shared. Yes. Also tomorrow's presentations and everything else we want to share with you. If there is anyone with any issue, please see me after this. Otherwise, we have come to the end of this program. Honorable Christopher, would you close with a few remarks?
First, I want to thank all the representatives that have given us the information that we needed. I think it's a good start. We want to assure all stakeholders that have been invited that we will make use of this very valuable information. I hope that all the organizations that are represented will be part of the same. Thank you very much and see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Okay, we are all dismissed. See you tomorrow. Let's start again on time for some demo viewing. Thank you.